All right, so you ready to dive into something wild? We're talking pop stars, presidents, global conspiracies. Buckle up, because this one's a doozy. We're digging into a police interrogation transcript today, getting inside the head of a man known as J.Oddie. And let me tell you, his story is one for the books. Just a heads up what you're going to hear. Those are J.Oddie's claims, not saying they're facts. Our job today, we're dissecting this whole web of allegations, figuring out what makes it so captivating, but also pointing out where things might go off the rails. Right off the bat, J.Oddie doesn't hold back. He goes straight for the big guns, saying there's a secret society calling the shots, manipulating everything. You guessed it, the Illuminati, drug trafficking, media control. According to J.Oddie, they're behind it all.
It's almost like a real-life version of those movies where there's this shadowy group pulling the strings, and it plays into those fears people have, about who really has the power, that lack of control.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. J.Oddie starts name-dropping, bringing Sean Diddy Combs into the mix, along with a group he calls the Bula. He says it's like a branch of the Illuminati. Quick note for listeners, though. When folks usually talk about the Bula, they're talking about those historic black fraternities and sororities, totally different from how J.Oddie's using it. And just when you think it can't get any wilder, he hits us with this Illuminati card game. Apparently, it predicts real-world events. I mean, we're talking about some serious claims here. He even describes this whole private jet operation for smuggling cocaine.
It makes you think about confirmation bias.
Right?
Our brains are wired to seek out info that backs up what we already believe. So, if you're already prone to conspiracy theories, you start seeing these connections everywhere, even if they're, well, a bit of a stretch.
Totally. It's like looking for shapes in the clouds. Suddenly everything has a hidden meaning. But here's the thing that throws me. We've got this grand conspiracy, powerful players, and then J.Oddie's big reveal is that he's accused of breaking a chandelier. Seems oddly specific.
You have to be careful, though. It's tempting to jump to psychological conclusions based on limited info. We're just hearing one side of the story, and it's important to avoid armchair diagnoses.
Right, we're just scratching the surface here. So back to this chandelier. He smashes it at a property owned by, get this, former President Trump. J.Oddie claims it was a message. His words, a message about corruption, especially the influence of Saudi Arabia. At least that's how he sees it.
It speaks to the challenges we're facing today, that blurring of the lines between genuine political concerns and these narratives driven by conspiracy theories, especially now when everything feels so polarized.
And just when you think you've got J.Oddie figured out, he throws another curveball. He says Trump isn't part of this grand scheme, but actually a victim of it. Of course, no conspiracy theory would be complete without a scandal, so he drags Stormy Daniels into it.
Which highlights how easily these things get tangled up, misinformation mixing with pre-existing conspiracy theories. J.Oddie's story might be extreme, but it shows how made-up details can weave their way into a larger narrative, making it tough to separate fact from fiction.
And it gets even wilder. He claims Trump's own doctor was slipping him something to, well, let's just say, impact his performance.
It speaks to that human need to make sense of things, right? If you're already predisposed to a certain view of someone, these kinds of details, true or not, they just slot right into that existing framework.
It's like our brains are hardwired to seek out evidence that supports what we already believe, even if it sounds crazy to someone else.
It's human nature, but it can be dangerous when it leads you down those rabbit holes of misinformation.
And it's about to get even darker. J.Oddie then starts talking about the music industry, claiming record sales are intentionally inflated by, get this, orchestrating the deaths of popular musicians.
Wow, that's a heavy accusation. It taps into that feel that nothing is truly random, that someone's always pulling the strings behind the scenes. A pretty common thread in conspiracy theories.
It's chilling. Why do you think these narratives resonate so strongly with some people?
Well, think about it. We crave simple explanations in a world that feels increasingly complex and chaotic. Conspiracy theories offer a sense of order, of knowing. Even if that knowledge isn't based in reality, it can be strangely comforting.
It's like holding the key to a secret code, a way to unlock the hidden meaning behind it all. But as we're seeing with J.Oddie, those so-called truths can be dangerous. He connects these seemingly unrelated events, building this massive conspiracy where everyone is in on it, except of course for him. J.Oddie paints himself as this lone wolf, fighting against the machine.
That's a classic element in these narratives. The believer as the hero, they see themselves as warriors battling against these corrupt forces that most people are too afraid to confront.
Which brings us back to that incident at Trump's property. He deliberately chose that location, breaking that chandelier. For J.Oddie, it wasn't just vandalism, it was symbolic.
It shows how actions can be twisted to fit a conspiracy-driven worldview. Symbols, hidden messages, secret codes, they become the lens through which everything is interpreted, even if those interpretations are, let's say, imaginative.
Right, like he's speaking a language that only he understands. And that paranoia, it even seeps into his personal life. He's convinced he's being followed, his phone tapped, his every move monitored. It's clear he believes he's in danger because of what he claims to know.
That feeling of being watched, of being persecuted for possessing secret knowledge, it's another common theme we see. It reinforces the idea that they're a threat to these powerful forces, even if those threats are largely imagined.
So it becomes a vicious cycle. The more isolated he feels, the more he retreats into this world where his beliefs are constantly being validated. And just to be clear, we are analyzing J.Oddie's claims, not endorsing them. The goal here is to understand these narratives, how they form, how they spread, and the impact they have.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the patterns, the anxieties that fuel these narratives, and learning to separate fact from fiction.
Which is definitely easier said than done, especially in the age of social media, where misinformation spreads like wildfire, often amplified by algorithms that prioritize engagement over accuracy.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue. But by shining a light on these narratives, examining them critically, we can hopefully start having more informed, nuanced conversations.
And hopefully bridge the divides that these narratives often exploit. So getting back to the interrogation. As we get toward the end of the transcript, things take an unexpected turn. After laying out this massive conspiracy, claiming he's been threatened, J.Oddie drops a bombshell. He reveals that he doesn't actually hate Trump. In fact, he says he admires him.
Interesting. It highlights just how complex belief systems can be. Someone can buy into a specific worldview, even one steeped in conspiracy theories, without their views being entirely consistent.
A good reminder that people are complex, and their beliefs often go beyond simple categorization.
Exactly. It's not as simple as saying you're either a believer or you're not. Reality is rarely that black and white.
And it gets even weirder. He says he did all of this, the whole chandelier thing, to protect Trump, to warn him about the people J.Oddie believes are really calling the shots. It's this strange mix of, I don't know, admiration and paranoia, like some kind of twisted loyalty.
It's a reminder that these narratives, they're often driven by powerful emotions, fear, distrust, but also this deep yearning for meaning, for some semblance of control in a world that can feel so unpredictable.
It's like he's crafted this whole story where he's both the hero and the victim. And right at the center of it all, you've got this broken chandelier, almost like a physical manifestation of his frustration.
It underscores the fact that conspiracy theories don't just emerge in a vacuum. They take root in places where people feel powerless, unheard, like they can't trust the information they're being given.
Which brings us back to what you were saying earlier about social media. Have we essentially created these echo chambers where people are constantly bombarded with information that reinforces their existing beliefs, regardless of whether those beliefs hold any water?
Exactly. It's in these online spaces, fueled by algorithms more concerned with engagement than truth, that narratives like J.Oddie's can flourish.
So where do we go from here? How do we even begin to tackle this issue of conspiracy thinking in the digital age?
That's the million-dollar question. There's no magic bullet. But I think it starts with equipping people with the tools to think critically, to question what they encounter, to actively seek out diverse perspectives, and to be wary of information that seems to perfectly align with what they already believe.
So it's about approaching information with a healthy dose of skepticism, but also with empathy. Because as J.Oddie's story illustrates, behind every conspiracy theory, there's a human being grappling with a world that can often feel overwhelming and confusing. You know, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with more questions than answers, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the real takeaway here isn't about definitively debunking these narratives, but rather using them as a springboard for deeper reflection, to better understand the human condition in this era of information overload.
Well said. We're all susceptible to these narratives to some degree, and the most effective way to counter misinformation isn't through censorship or ridicule, but through open dialogue, critical thinking, and a willingness to engage with the nuances of these complex issues.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, I want to leave our listeners with this. Be mindful of the narratives you encounter in your daily lives, whether you're reading news articles, scrolling through social media feeds, or even just having conversations with friends and family. Ask yourself, what are the underlying assumptions at play here? Who stands to gain from promoting this particular narrative? And most importantly, what evidence is there to either support or refute the claims being made? The truth is out there, as they say. but uncovering it requires a discerning eye, sound judgment, and a commitment to critical thinking. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.